Distinguished guests, we are at the concluding session of this 75th anniversary conference on Pakistan and the changing global order. Our chief guest of the session, of this concluding session, is Senator Mushahid Hussain, Chairman Senate Defense Committee and Co-Chairman International Conference of Asian Political Parties. Thank you, Mushahid Saab. Now I would like to request Dr. Jehan Perera, Executive Director, National Peace Council of Sri Lanka, Colombo. Dr. Jehan Perera, please join us on stage. Now I request Dr. Saba Khattak, Senior Gender Specialist, World Bank and former Executive Director, Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Islamabad. Dr. Saba Khattak, please join us on stage. Now I request Dr. Farhan Hanif, Siddiqi, Director and Associate Professor, School of Politics and International Relations, Quaid-i-Azam University, Islamabad. Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqi, please join us on the stage. Now, I would like to request Dr. Irina Serenko, Senior Research Associate, Scientific Secretary of Pakistani Section, Center for the Study of Near and Middle Eastern Countries, Institute of Oriental Studies, Russian Academy of Sciences, Moscow. Dr. Irina Serenko, please join us on the stage. Over to you, Mushahid Sensei Saab. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The final session of this amazing conference, which has been, I would say, conjured up by Dr. Masuma Hasan, bringing some of the best and the brightest minds of Pakistan from all over Pakistan on a host of issues, is coming to its finale. I hope it will be a fitting finale, inshallah. And please be seated, no crosstalk. We have 4 distinguished speakers who are flanking me. Madam, please have a seat. Who are flanking me on the right and left. And each one of them would be speaking for 10 minutes sharp, because we have limited time. We've already overshot. And before the 10 minutes conclude, a minute or so before that, I'll give them a polite warning that time to wind up. And we look forward to a very good session, because we have unity and diversity. We have gender balance also on both sides. And we look forward to a great discussion, as we have seen in the earlier sessions today and yesterday. The first speaker would be from our great neighbor, our friend, Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan cricket team is very popular here. And now Sri Lanka was very much in the news for the wrong reasons, but I'm glad everything is under control now for the time being. And Dr. Jehan Perera is the Executive Director of the National Peace Council of Sri Lanka in Colombo. And over to you, sir, for your 10-minute presentation. Thank you.
Well, I'm very much privileged to address this distinguished gathering, and I wish to thank Dr. Masuma for having invited me all the way from Sri Lanka. I was also invited 5 years ago to address the 70th anniversary of the formation of this institution, and it was on the same topic, on the topic of reconciliation. And at that time, I was hopeful that there would be reconciliation in Sri Lanka. Our civil war, was over 8 years at that time, but there was no reconciliation. The reconciliation attempts failed. The war was over, but the problem continued. Now Sri Lanka has been in the news again this year for the wrong reasons. The economic collapse of the country, the halving of people's incomes, making it very difficult for them, and the overthrow of the government, a mass protest movement that led to the president of the country, who had been elected with a very big majority 2 years earlier. He had to flee the country. Now, that one of the reasons, I think one of the main reasons for the plight that Sri Lanka has fallen into is the fact that we have not attained internal peace in our country. Our country is divided. And we know that a house divided, a family divided, a country divided will not fare very well. So internal factors have played a very big part in the fate that has befallen our country. And I say this keeping in mind that at independence, when we received independence from the British in 1948, we are very proud to say that we were possibly only behind Japan in the whole of Asia. In our country, we refer to our slums as Koreas. Why? Because at that time, in the 50s, perhaps 40s and 50s, Korea was a very poor country. And we who had been under the British for 150 years, who had been exploited by the British, so we say, because colonials will always want to rule, to exploit, to dominate, to oppress the people. But we were second in Asia or third in Asia, very close to the top, until we got our independence. And now where are we? So that, I think, is something for us to think about. Those of us in the Asian region, South Asian region, British India. Now, we've been listening, talking these last 2 days, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. We are a region torn by conflict. Conflict within our countries, conflict with our neighbors. And as a result, we have fallen behind other regions. Other regions have gone far ahead of us, but we are conflicted. And as soon as I came, I asked Dr. Masuma, are there going to be Indians? Are there going to be Bangladeshis? And she said, no, I tried to get them, but they didn't come. So this is the plight of our country, of our region, of our country and our region. There's a positive feature of Sri Lanka's economic collapse, the difficulty Sri Lanka is going through, because it is causing us to think again. We are wondering what went wrong. Such a country that had such bright prospects. And this thinking is there, especially among the youth and also among our public servants. They're also thinking, questioning. And one of the slogans of our protest movement that made me very happy was the young people shouting and saying, we Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims, we are citizens, we are equal citizens. We know that we have been divided. Our politicians divided us. But now we know that the problem is not with each other, it is with the system, and they have been demanding system change. So there is a need in Sri Lanka now for unity and through reconciliation. And the two key features to reconciliation in Sri Lanka, the first is power sharing. Power sharing between a permanent 75%, the majority Sinhalese, and the permanent 25%, who are minorities, Tamils and Muslims. And however many elections are held, the proportions will be the same in our parliament, which has led the Sinhalese thinking to prevail when there's a difference of opinion between the Sinhalese majority and the minority, Tamil and Muslims. The decisions are invariably in favor of the Sinhalese. And that is what led the Tamils to want to fight for a separate state. Because, in a way, we are a country of two majorities. One, the national majority, the Sinhalese, 75%. But in the north and east of our country, near India, the Tamils are the majority, a regional majority, two majorities in conflict. Now the Tamils tried very hard to break away. They fought for 30 years, they fought, trying to set up their own independent country. But they failed because the Sinhalese, the Sri, are too big. They are too big to be defeated. The Sinhalese will never allow Sri Lanka to be divided. But at the same time, the Tamils will never give up asking for justice. They will fight. And they are fighting not only within Sri Lanka, in the diaspora. Large number of Tamils, very influential. Some of them MPs in other countries, in Canada, in New Zealand. So maybe there's a parallel there, I think, to the situation, the unfortunate situation in Kashmir. India has now taken over, incorporated Kashmir. I think they will not give it up. However much Pakistan tries to fight with them, they will not give it up. But the Kashmiris will also not give up. They will not give up their fight for, their demand for justice. Now in Sri Lanka, we have to find the solution to this. In our case, in the case of Sri Lanka, a much smaller situation, we have to find the answer. How to share power, how to treat people fairly. So that is one challenge. The second challenge we face is the challenge of dealing with the past. We call it transitional justice, truth, what really happened during the war, accountability, war crimes, what happened to those who were caught on the battlefield at the very end, the Tiger leaders, what happened to them? What happened to their families? We don't know the answers, and there has to be accountability, and there has to be reparation, and there has to be institutional reform to ensure this never happen again. And then I heard, today we discussed the issue of Bangladesh, Pakistan and Bangladesh, the demand for an apology. Now in Sri Lanka, we are struggling with this issue of what happened in the past, how to deal with the past. The government, the Sinhalese side, the Sri Lankan army won. The Sinhalese army, the Sri Lankan army is a Sinhala army, largely. They won. They don't want to go back to the past. They don't want to go back and say they're sorry. They think they did the right thing in fighting and winning at all costs. But the Tamil side, don't forget, they want to know what happened to their loved ones. And Sri Lanka so far has not given an answer. Now we are thinking of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That is the present answer of Sri Lanka. Because we have been before the international community in Geneva on 9 occasions, 9 resolutions against Sri Lanka, and each one getting harder than the other. The present one talks about economic crimes. It talks about setting up an international mechanism, fact-finding unit in Geneva, which will provide information, data to anyone, any other country that practices the principle of universal jurisdiction, which is that Sri Lankans can be arrested anywhere in the world if they have committed crimes, international crimes. So now the question is, will we go ahead? And this requires selfless leadership. Leadership that thinks of the whole country, of all the people. Even in 1928, when the British were thinking of giving us independence or self-rule, they came and studied Sri Lanka, and they said, these people, the communities are so divided. 1928, before party politics, it is not just party politics that has divided us. There is a division within our society right from the beginning. So we need very superior leadership to get out. We need leadership. You can't go to the people and ask them. People are divided. So we need leadership. We are hopeful now. The optimistic thing is, I'm hopeful that we now have such a leader. I'm not sure. Because he's a man who has been a 5-time former prime minister. He has lost 20 elections, maybe won 5, but lost 20. He contested the presidency. He never won the presidency because he's not a racist. He's not a bigot. He's not a nationalist. He can't win the support of the people. But because of this protest movement, where the president was driven out and where the entire parliament was discredited, they had no choice but to ask him. He only was one person in parliament from his party. They asked him to be president. Now he is president. Some people say God has given him to us now. He at last has got what he couldn't win from the people. And our hope is that he will lead us forward. He has actually said that by the 75th anniversary, our 75th anniversary, which is next February, that we will solve this problem. The problem that we have not been able to solve for 75 years. Because there have been many negotiations, many pacts that have been signed between the leaders of government and the leaders of Tamils, not implemented, because they couldn't implement. The parliament revolted against it on every occasion. Their own parties revolted. This time it's different, because we know that something has gone seriously wrong. The parliament is discredited. This man is on top. And my hope is that Sri Lanka will actually be able to move forward in the area of reconciliation, and that we will be able to be an example to our neighbors who have helped us, who have stood by us in this time. India, $4 billion they've given us. Bangladesh, $300 million they lent us. And Pakistan, much poorer at this time, but gave us medicine and gave us cement. So we're very grateful. And we hope that we will be able to inspire you one day through our own success. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. On a very positive, hopeful note, and I've had the honor and privilege of meeting President Ranil Wickremesinghe on a number of occasions. First as opposition leader, then as prime minister. He is a very squeaky clean, upright Pakasab in the British tradition, barrister, and I'm glad that he's revived hope. And your two other points are well taken, that South Asia is probably one of the least connected regions in the world, and that people in Sri Lanka have realized that the problem is the system, not the communities. And I have had great experience in Sri Lanka during my visits, including my honeymoon in Sri Lanka. So the Sri Lankan people are great people. Thank you, sir. Now we request Dr. Saba Khattak, Saba, to make a presentation. She is of course, senior gender specialist on the World Bank, and she played a big role in reviving and rejuvenating the SDPI when she was leading it once upon a time. Over to you, Dr. Saba Khattak.
Thank you.
And because it's the age of women's empowerment, you have 3.5 minutes more than him.
Thank you. Thank you for your affirmative action. Thank you so much, Dr. Masuma Hasan, for organizing this conference, which is exciting for all of us. We are learning a lot. Also, I want to quickly correct, I'm not at the World Bank. I left it in 2016. I'm right now affiliated with the Institute of Social Studies. I just will go through quickly with I did a PowerPoint, so I'll quickly go through it. I wanted to start with the story Sultana's Dream. I don't know how many of you have heard about it. Begum Ruqayya Sakhavat Hussain wrote it in 1905, and it's a feminist utopia. And we can go into the dream. It's a short reading, but I'll just give you the gist of it because I see that not many people know about it. It's a text to which many of us go when we are talking about feminism, and I was requested to talk about women and peace. Ruqayya Hussain wrote this, and it was published in 1905, in which she imagined a very different world. A world in which, of course, the roles were reversed for men and women. So men were in the house and women were out there doing things. But it's really a vision of a world where there is no war, there is no violence, where labor is not exploited, where women are technologically very advanced, in which there are flying cars. This is 1905, in which there is no agriculture labor who is exploited, but technology takes care of everything. A dream in which women have harnessed solar power. So आपका climate change के issues जो आज आ रहे हैं वो ना आते अगर तब हो जाता, and they are controlling the weather. The religion is that of love and purity. So religious differences that plague us today are not there in the women's world. It is more of affinity rather than one-person domination, and the idea at that time that was being advanced that women have smaller brains. This was actually being scientifically said to be the case. And she wrote back then that, well, elephants also have big brains. They weigh more, but that doesn't mean that they can dominate. And so the same for men. They may have bigger brains in terms of size and weight, but doesn't mean they need to dominate everything. So this feminist utopia from more than 100 years ago, if we were to dream of it in Pakistan, I would say, how can we look at our National Finance Commission award if we took a gender equality principle and made it our distribution? Can we imagine what our budgets would look like? And if we added the 20% extra that we give for poverty and backwardness, which women fit, they will get 20% more. So it will be a very different world. By the way, in Ruqayya Begum's world, because men were at home, the workday for women was only 2 hours. She said men waste 6 hours smoking cigarettes. So when we do our NFC award and we reverse, we have justice, can we imagine how things would be? And I would like to do that. But going on to our next slide, we were talking about the global politics, global peace, and so on. And in that context, I wanted to talk about the World Inequality Report that has come out this year, in which it says that across the world, inequality has gotten to the levels at which it was at the peak of Western imperialism at the turn of the 20th century before the First World War. So the news is not good on inequality or wealth across the world. Then within the world, within countries, of course, it is worse. But overall, the share of the richest 20% is 52%, and the bottom 50% get only 8.5% of resources. So, these are larger issues of inequality that we confront. The same for gender inequality across the globe. So women's share of income has improved only 4% points over 30 years. So it has gone from 30% of what men earn. The inequality is still to reach 50%. Women's, the improvement is only 4%, 34% is the current level across the world. So it's not just Pakistan. And in some countries, like I said, in some countries, inequality is much worse than it is at the global level. And in some countries, women's income has actually decreased. They face greater violence within the home. We know that greater discrimination in the public sphere. There is also in the morning, I know that there was an excellent presentation. I learned a lot from Ambassador Zamir Akram, but he said the Chinese are excellent because they don't question, they don't ask about minimum wage, unlike GSP plus. The Europeans who drive human rights, yes, they do. But the point is, if we are going to be paying our labor below minimum wage and 1% in our country receive 10%, they earn 10% of overall they have resources, then हमारा तो जो अगर 1% पे जाए तो लेबर के हवाले से we have only less than 1% that is organized. So if we are going to go the Chinese path, we need to rethink about the larger issue of justice, not just global, but within Pakistan as well. Where do the subsidies go? And I would like to come to the solutions. In Pakistan, the UNDP 2020 report, authored by Hafiz Pasha Sab, gives us detailed breakdowns of subsidies in which the corporate sector, this is in terms of tax evasion, in terms of input subsidies, outputs ke zyada inflated prices, and so on. So the corporate sector gets 780 billion rupees of subsidy. State-owned enterprises, 370 billion. Feudal elite, traders, the military, surprisingly, 257 billion. That's their Fauji Foundation kinds of outfits, their businesses. So we don't know about the other side. Tax evasion, 168 billion. The total is 2,660 billion, which is 7% of your GDP. If we invest this GDP into our social protection programs, which right now is utilizing 0.6%, we can take care of a lot of our problems. It is not that the money is not there. It is a question of realigning. And I know that's belling the cat, but at least there are some answers in this dismal scenario that we face. I want to jump to political security because we can't talk about economics without politics. And when you look at the issues at the global level, what we find is the veto power has been wielded at least, well, more than 293, probably 300 times on issues of global importance till now. And similarly, when the UN Secretary General suggested a ceasefire during the pandemic, both China and the US said we'll veto it. So, when we talk about the globe and peace, we need to take into account these kinds of asymmetries. And Subah mein Dr. Ashfaq Hasan Khan did make many connections, but I wanted to bring this on the table as well. And so when it's the global security architecture that is failing women as well as people in general, because when we take this on board, what it ignores is that people are trapped in conflicts all the time. And I can tell you from my time at the World Bank, when the World Bank discovered that more than 60 million people were displaced, and that for the World Bank was big business that it was missing out on because that was part of the humanitarian agenda and not development. So of course now even Pakistan is going to be signing up for a loan for Afghan refugees. It boggles the mind. But yes, a country on the verge of default is willing to take on a loan for managing refugee camps that it has managed for 30, 40 years. But loans bechna zaruri hai. to come to the issue of peace, and like not just the absence of violence, but like Johan Galtung, who was my teacher, taught us that it is also about structural violence. We need to understand structural violence before we can talk about peace, and he wrote about this in the 1960s. So even though the concept still continues to be radical because not a lot has changed, yet we need to look at it. And within this, of course, feminist critiques are there. I will not take a lot of time, but the point is that जब हम active conflict को देखते हैं, not just the violence women face within the home or the violence that comes out of discrimination, but also the violence in terms of active conflict, then women are usually seen as victims, but there is also feminist literature that looks at them as active agents of change in their own destiny. And then there is also the whole movement for the inclusion of women in peace negotiations, peace agreements. But that brings me to the resolution 1325, जिसमें औरतों के लिए, with a lot of feminist activism and so on, this resolution came about, but a lot of women in the South critique it because this doesn't take on board many of the imperialist kinds of agendas and this whole unidirectional, the North teaching us how to do peace building and how to do it locally, but globally no one will question the whole edifice of this peace, but locally at that village level we will empower women to do a little bit here and a little bit there, and we'll have multi-donor projects in our former tribal areas. So that is not the answer until we look at the larger global context of all this. Which brings me to the idea of transformative peace, which is really a feminist peace in which you look at patriarchy and you say we fundamentally want to transform it. So there is greater equality, there is greater justice, there is more fairness. No one is saying that men should become like, be given women's role, but that there should be equality. It is not about reversal, it is not about matriarchy. And for that we need to re-envision everything. I think जो FIFA है, मैं बोलना तो भूल गई, लेकिन FIFA में लोगों ने, it wasn't countries or governments, when the players boycotted Israeli journalists, when the players said free Palestine, they spoke. People speak, people convey things. Countries may not do so in the UN. When we talk of refugees, when we talk of migration, it is not just Pakistan's issue or Afghanistan's issue, and if the World Bank is getting business out of displacement, yes, displacement will continue to happen. So it's really larger issues of justice that we need to question and to address at the fundamental points from where they emerge. And so that was the main point I wanted to convey, that patriarchy में भी fundamental transformation तभी हो सकती है जब हम वो relations inequality के तब्दील करें towards equality, और वही globally for countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Saba Gul Khattak Sahiba, for a very informative presentation, and I think that on her point on inequality is well taken. Those of you who have read the Oxfam report, which was issued in January 2022 on inequality kills, this is the post-pandemic first report on inequality. They mentioned the 10 richest men in the world doubled their income during the pandemic. And 99% of the people in the world, their incomes were less. Not because just of the pandemic, because of structural economic policies. That is the key thing. And I think that is absolutely, and also on vetoes you mentioned, there were 43 vetoes by the US on Palestine issue, by the way. So you can see that. And FIFA was boycotted by BBC on the first day because they said there was no beer and other issues also. But I'm glad on FIFA. It's very interesting how it's Sialkot made footballs and Pakistan Army and Navy providing security to the World Cup soccer. Thank you. Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqi, Director and Associate Professor, School of Politics and International Relations, Quaid-i-Azam University, Islamabad. The floor is open to you, sir, for precisely 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mushahid Saba. I'll try my best to stick to time. I'm thankful to Dr. Masuma Hasan, to the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs for inviting me to this conference, and including me as a part of this very interesting panel on seeking global peace from the perspective of culture, identity, and ethnic politics. Peace and ethnicity are two subjects that are very close to my heart. These are topics that I think about, that I write on, and I also teach at the Quaid-i-Azam University. So let me begin with an anecdote. When I walk into my conflict resolution and peace studies class, the first thing that I ask students two questions. So the first question that I ask my students is to identify wars and conflicts in the international system. And immediately they throw a number of wars in my face. The Cold War and the World Wars and the invasions, the Soviet Union, the American invasions, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And this is where I ask them a second question. I ask them to identify contexts where conflict resolution has taken place, where peace agreements have been signed. And surprisingly, the responses are minimal to a complete no. And this is where I tell them that the reason why the answer is less to conflict resolution context is not because the universe of cases of conflict resolution and peace agreement context are little or less. It's because our brains are hardwired to think about, to believe in facts that conflict, wars, and violence are the pivotal aspects or features or factors of international political life. So when we do the subject of international relations, for example, we begin with certain truths. Anarchy is the condition in which states survive in. When two states relate with each other, it is the security dilemma that obtains or pertains between them. In an anarchic system, it is relative gains that states are more concerned about, and absolute gains cannot transpire between states. So the point that I'm trying to make here is the way that we think about politics, the way we think about international politics, the way we think about identity, the way we think about culture, the way we think about ethnicity has a pivotal role to play in shaping not only our understanding, but also in shaping foreign policy and strategies of great powers or even other states. Take up the American National Security Strategy report that has come out this year. A number of variations have come out from the White House, from the Department of Defense. And if you read through that report, you cannot completely rule out identity dynamics within it. So what the report does is that it presents a very ethnocentric view of the world. It places US at the core of the international system as a state, and the self-representation of the American state is that it is the good state, it is the liberal state, and it is the state which is the protector of the rules-based international order. And then you have other states, China, which is termed as a revisionist state. You have Russia, which is seen as a revitalized malign actor. And then you have North Korea, which is termed as a rogue state. Take up the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I don't think you can root out identity dynamics there as well. So when it came to the Russian invasion and it came to Ukraine, so Putin came out with the statement that these Ukrainians are not Ukrainians, they're actually Russians. So he basically negated the Ukrainian identity. And very ironically, he said that the purpose of the Russian invasion was to denazify Ukraine. So he used the language of denazification, forgetting that Zelensky is from the Jewish faith. So that was really interesting as well. So again, ideational dynamics seep into foreign policies, seep into the strategies of great powers. When we speak about identity politics in terms, let me make the connect with how it operates within states. There are two tendencies, and this is nothing new. This has been this case for the last 300-400 years since the Treaty of Westphalia, is that there are two dialectics which are present when we speak about identity politics in state. There is the centripetal tendency or logic, and there is the centrifugal tendency or logic, and both reinforce each other. So when states use the centripetal logic, the state elites, if you will, what they do is they try to reinforce unity. They try to reinforce uniformity. And they do this around a set of dominant cultural, religious, linguistic idioms. And think about Urdu and Islam, for example. Now, the problem in the centripetal logic about breeding unity is that a large majority, a supermajority of states, they survive in conditions of diversity. And what the centripetal logic of creating unity does is that it completely ignores the diversity that is found at the social level. The reason why this question is important is because now we have a phenomena, a monster in fact, which is called as populism. You have populist movements, you have populist leaders, what Ashutosh Vashni calls as ethno-populism. And what this populism is really good at in terms of identity politics is that it really unleashes the emotional and tribal passions of the majority. And then majoritarianism seeps in. And the irony and the paradox again is that majorities start fearing minorities. Last month I was watching television and I saw this advertisement of the Punjab government which celebrated the fact that the Khatme-Nabuwat clause is now part of the Nikah-Nama as well. And I was just wondering, where is this state going? We're already in the midst of majoritarianism within this country. And again, that is not what we want. So again, how much uniformity or a centralized imperative do you need in a country, for example, Pakistan, which is already 97% Muslim? And because there is this centripetal tendency of enforcing uniformity and a centralized imperative from the top, this then leads to the centrifugal tendencies. Minorities, for example, who come to resist the dominant culture or the dominant language or religion that is being imposed from the very top. And it is not mainly about cultural, linguistic, or even religious identity, but also there are cases, meaning we could make the case, speak further about the lack of or the denial of political participation. There's also the fact of the denial or the fact of economic marginalization as well. Now, in terms of peace and international politics, and I'll try and be quick here, is that this is transpiring all across the globe. This is not a problem only of the global South countries. This is also a problem of the global North countries. Dr. Saba mentioned about structural violence. Think about the Black Lives Matter movement in the US, a country which is close to celebrating 250 years of democracy. And you have the debate of cultural and structural violence in the US, and again, the peripheralization of the black minority. Think about the rise of the far right in Europe and how these majorities are again, so to speak, creating uniformity from the top, which is now leading to resentment amongst the minorities. And the most important fact, substantive fact in terms of this resistance from below, is this new phenomena in the last 10 years or so, where you have newer movements for national self-determination. So Scotland voted in an independence referendum 2014. It did not succeed, it failed. But Scotland now wants to become an independent state. Catalonia region in Spain voted in an independence referendum, did not succeed, but now wants independence from Spain. The same happened in the Iraqi Kurdistan region, independence referendum, and again, wanting to create their own state. So this new tendency, or this new movement, and again, coming from the global North countries, the UK and Spain, we are actually speaking about the breakup of Britain. And the second Scottish independence referendum is already beckoning. So just think about what kind of demonstration impact will it have on the rest of the world. where countries like Pakistan, India, others are also reckoning with our own movements and ethnic conflicts, of course, and movements for independence. So let me just quickly summarize, let me just quickly conclude by how all of this connects with global peace. I think the most important question as we move forward with respect to ethnic identity, culture, nationality, nationalist politics, is how do states, societies, cultures, leaders, the political class deals with the question of diversity. I think this is absolutely important as we move forward. So there are only two options. So do they continue to do so by way of pursuing assimilative strategies, denying ethnic minorities their rights, privileges, or in effect denying diversity at all by continuing to impose this uniformity from the top? Or do they deal with it by letting go of their cognitive biases, of these othering processes at the cognitive level, which creates divides, and normalize diversity? I think this is absolutely important. It's an important fact of social life. And if they normalize diversity, I think this is where pathways for social harmony and peaceful coexistence can really be realized in international politics. This is where I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Siddiqi, for a superb presentation laced with a lot of facts. And I think you mentioned success stories. Since we have a representative from Nepal, I'd like to mention Nepal because I've been there many times. Nepal is a good example of a country which faced a civil war led by the Maoists against the monarchy. And then they incorporated the Maoist army in the Nepalese army. And then they had the transition from monarchy to democracy, monarchy to republic, and unitary state to a federal state. So it's remarkable. And I think Nepal is the new Sri Lanka. Because they have resilience and women's empowerment. And the other thing you mentioned about the reports, I was just reading the recent report of the Pentagon on the China military power report, which was issued on 29th November. And they are worried about, they said China is expanding its nuclear arsenal. They have 400 bombs apparently, and America has 5,000. So they are worried about that. And they're worried about the defense budget. The US has a defense budget of 800 billion, and China has 260 billion. So you can see that. And I think one of the reasons why people in the West are worried about China, especially the US, is because China is the first non-Western power to challenge Western hegemony in the last 300 years. So our final speaker on the panel would be a lady who's come from Russia. We saw the movie From Russia with Love long time ago. Dr. Irina Serenko, Senior Research Associate and from the Center for the Study of Near East and Middle Eastern Countries, Institute of Oriental Studies, Russian Academy of Sciences. And Madam, I have had the honor and privilege of visiting your Institute for Oriental Studies in the days of the Soviet Union. In '85, when Mikhail Kapitsa was the head, and then later on, also when Evgeny Primakov, who was then later on the Prime Minister and head of intelligence, he was there. So I spent a lot of time there with both these illustrious Russian statesmen. Over to you, Madam. Good luck. Yes.
Honorable hosts, Dr. Masuma Hasan, Dr. Tanvir Khalid, Your Excellencies, distinguished speakers, and dear friends. It is really a pleasure and an honor for me to participate in this fantastic, we may say, conference, international conference, which is devoted to the oldest research institute. And I should say that perhaps we are twins institutes, because Russian Institute of Oriental Studies is the oldest research institute in the former Soviet Union and in Russia. So I'd like to speak on the issue connected with Pakistan-Russia relations in the changing world order, and both countries stand for global peace and stability. I should say, ladies and gentlemen, that the current realities of the global economic and political transformation have been marked by a turbulent international situation. But for such regional close states as Russia and Pakistan, there are intentions to maintain their foreign policy orientation on further Eurasian integration, which serves for both countries' national interests and securities. And it was mentioned in many papers delivered yesterday and today of our distinguished speakers. Moscow and Islamabad seem to be directed their attempts on continuation of the constructive dialogue that has begun between them in recent years on a bilateral and multilateral basis, including the format of such Eurasian organization as SCO. Their interaction continues also through such SCO regional partner as the Conference of Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, CICA. And which transformed over 30 years from the dialogue platform into the international organization nowadays with its organization structure. And all SCO member states are also members of the supplementary regional organization, which is in turn cooperates with the Eurasian Economic Union. Russia started to be the next year the chair of this organization. The last SCO summit was held in Samarkand on September, on the 16th of September this year, in an expanded form. On its sideline, the bilateral and multilateral meetings of Russia and Pakistani leaders were held at the aim of further mutually beneficial cooperation enhancement in the vector of Eurasian integration. Thus, Russian President Vladimir Putin, during his meeting with the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, on the 15th of September this year, underlined the importance of Pakistan as one of our priority partners, both in Southeast Asia and in Asia as a whole. Relations between our countries are developing in an absolutely positive way. No wonder that both leaders agreed to follow the relevant direction of regional integration on the vast Eurasian territories. During their joint meeting, they in particular discussed the development of transport and logistics corridors, energy routes for gas supplies, including the Pakistan Stream main gas pipeline with the projects of its connectivity with the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, MGP project, which should promote the interaction and interconnectivity of Central and South Asia energy infrastructure. They also discussed the possibility of supplying the pipeline gas from Russia by using the already existing infrastructure on the territory of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, then through Afghanistan into Pakistan. So we may say that Afghanistan, which once divided us, now it connected us together in the efforts to make Afghanistan stable, peaceful, as a heart of Central Asia, to connect regional countries for their prosperity and peace. It is clear that the implementation of this and other major regional projects depends upon the joint efforts of all involved participants to ensure security and stability in Afghan territory. The Prime Minister of Pakistan confirmed his country's commitment to close cooperation with Russia on Afghanistan track. In this field of defense and security, as well as in other areas of bilateral cooperation, including trade, transport, energy, investment, etc. Attracting foreign investments in various sectors of the Pakistani economy remains an urgent item in its development agenda. The beneficial geostrategic position of Pakistan, located on the conjunction of land and sea routes in South and Central Asia, determines the demand of this state not only on the regional economy level, but on the global as well, opening up the opportunity for the inclusive development of the country's transport system with the attraction of foreign investments for the modernization and integration of various international transport corridors. And recently signed in Moscow on the week of transport, which was held in Moscow not long ago, Moscow on the 17th of November signed an agreement with Pakistan on passengers, goods and oil transportation by road along the routes of the North-South corridor, promotes its geographic expansion of transport connectivity between Russia and Pakistan through the Iranian territory, and it will also advance the effective cooperation of the Eurasian friendly states in the new historical realities for the maintaining regional stability and the security by joint efforts. The problems of peace, security and stability in the Asian region were also discussed and focused, and were focused their intention by the participants of the sixth CICA summit held in October 12-13 this year, and in Astana. On its platform, the Russian President Vladimir Putin stressed the very noticeable, if not the key role of Asia in building a modern multipolar world. Here, he once again met with Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. And to be honest, that after April government change here in Pakistan, there was a kind of uncertainty in our bilateral relations, to tell you the truth. Perhaps due to the inner political and economic crisis with the devastating floods in Pakistan, as well as the imposed international sanctions on Russia. Bilateral relations stopped to be on the priority in the foreign policy of Pakistan. Though at the same time, some practical steps of bilateral cooperation still exist. And if you take, for example, Pakistan food security, there was a deal between our two countries on supplying Russian wheat to Pakistan. Firstly, it was 300,000 tons. Now more 450 was added. And it was settled that perhaps at the beginning of the next year, it will be supplied to Pakistan. Let us hope for this. However, the pause of some uncertainty in Pakistan bilateral relations was broken due to Islamabad and Moscow understanding of their shared strategic interests in the light of the gradual shift of the world's political and economic power centers to Asia, on the emerging landscape of a new cooperation model based on the principles of justice, equality, and multipolarity of the world order. A wide range of issues concerning bilateral relations and regional cooperation were discussed not long ago on our international conference at our Institute of Oriental Studies. It was held on the 26th of September, and it was devoted especially to the 75th anniversary of Pakistan. A high-level delegation came to participate, a senator's delegation came to participate in this conference. And while speaking about our bilateral relations, the ambassador of Pakistan in the Russian Federation stressed that in the Russian he underlined with satisfaction that the increasing trajectory in bilateral relations, which is not only positive but also perfect and continuous irrespective of the and continues to be on the rise, even though the government changed in Pakistan. So this is the continuation of positive relations between our two countries. In his welcoming speech at this scientific forum, honorary speaker, head of the high-ranking Pakistani Senate delegation, chairman of the Standing Committee on Human Rights, Senator Walid Iqbal, also stressed the necessity of expanding our Pakistan-Russia relations and fulfilling all the agreements which were concluded between our countries. And he reminded his father, or his grandfather, his grandfather, because you see, I had a chance and I was lucky enough to get acquainted with his father, Javed Iqbal, also. But he mentioned his idea of his grandfather, who was the founder, Allama Iqbal, who was you see, spiritual father of Pakistan founding, that there should be Renaissance, Asian Renaissance. And this Asian Renaissance is not possible without Russia. Great country on this Eurasian, the biggest Eurasian continent. So, Russia. Well, but we should, you see, of course, I mean that our today's conference showed that we should not blame each other, but we should try to find, you see, the way for making us closer to each other. And I think that this conference was a success in this direction. Thus, the intensification of the Russian-Pakistan relations has been determined by their shared geostrategic interests at the regional and global level in the new realities of global transition from geopolitics to geoeconomics, with the shift of the centers of the economic and political activities from the West to Asia. But I did not mention, you see, also Professor Gankovsky, who was the founder.
Yuri Gankovsky,
yes,
The Peoples of Pakistan. His book is an iconic book.
Iconic book, The History of Pakistan, yeah? And all other books. He also was of the opinion that our relations between Pakistan and Russia should be developed, and I even, you see, recite him. They need to expand and strengthen Russia-Pakistan political, trade, economic, scientific and cultural ties, which is not determined by conditional circumstances, but proceeds from the long-term vital state interest of the two countries. Okay, then I will finish my paper, my speech, showing you one book. The book is the name, it is published this year at our Institute of Oriental Studies, and it is devoted to our new and our famous poet Faiz, Ahmad Faiz.
Ahmad Faiz.
Yes.
Lenin Peace Prize. He won the Lenin Peace Prize in 1960.
Yes, you are right. What should I tell? The most important thing for Russian people is, if you want to communicate with other nations, you should know the culture, the traditions of these people. And we tried in Russia to acquaint our publicity with Pakistani traditions, with Pakistani clothes. And I want to give this and present this book, yes, to, what, sorry. Thank you very much and shukriya.
Well, we're coming to the conclusion, and a very good presentation by Dr. Irina Serenko. And Iqbal had mentioned 90 years ago, "Dekh mashriq se ubarte hue suraj ko dekh." See the sun rising in the east, the resurgence of Asia, which is now becoming a reality. And we agree with you, what you said about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the meeting in Samarkand, and also what President Vladimir Putin said about the emergence of a multipolar world. There are no longer sole superpowers. Thank you very much. The Honorable Chairperson of the Pakistan Institute for International Affairs, Dr. Masuma Hasan Saba. She and her family have been iconic in Pakistan. Her father, Khwaja Sarwar Hasan Saab, at the inception of Pakistan, at when Pakistan achieved freedom, established the first think tank on international affairs. He had that vision, he had that worldview that Pakistan has a role to play, not just in the region but globally as well. And I think that is extremely important. And I also want to recognize His Excellency Javed Jabbar Sahab, who is an eminent public intellectual. He's here, and we have distinguished people from all over. And Dr. Jehan Perera, Dr. Saba Khattak, Dr. Siddiqi Sahab, Farhan Siddiqi Sahab. We have had, I think, 2 exhaustive but constructive days. And Zayed Hussain, who was sitting next to me, was telling me that this is the best conference he's attended in the last 10 years. In terms of what he learned, and the quality of presentations, and I fully agree with that. I just joined today, but I could see that it was a very substantive discussion, and it's thanks to Masuma and the talented team. And I've also had the honor of being a very good friend and comrade of her illustrious husband, Fateh Yab Ali Khan Sahab. And when I was a journalist editor of the Muslim, Fateh Yab Ali Khan Sahab was underground. It was General Zia's martial law, 1983, MRD agitation. He was convener of the MRD, and intelligence was looking for him. And actually, he was staying next door to me in one of the hotels in Islamabad. And I went to interview him at late night. And I did a series of 3 interviews, which we carried on the front page. And the ISI was shocked. How come, where is he? But they couldn't locate him. And I said, I can't reveal my sources or location. And and it was an outstanding interviews he gave. With the bun style he had, with a lot of zing and a lot of clarity. And we miss him. Fateh Yab Sahab, he was one of the old certified leftists. I think one of them is only left. Karamat Ali Sahab is still here. He's sitting there. But otherwise, they don't make them anymore. Who was Dabang with strategic clarity and who made a great contribution. And Dr. Masuma has been a very eminent civil servant, also cabinet secretary, ambassador to Austria, public intellectual, activist, and a dear friend of the friends she has. So thank you for organizing this conference. This is about the changing world order and about Pakistan. So I think briefly I'd like to mention how the world is being transformed. And you've come from Russia, and we are seeing that transformation there also. I was struck by 3 or 4 statements by eminent world leaders in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And they said more or less the same thing separately. President Biden, in his national security strategy, this one is 16th of October, and he mentioned that this is going to be the decisive decade. Your great leader, Vladimir Putin, while speaking to the Valdai Club in Moscow on 27th of October, said that this is going to be the most dangerous decade after World War II. President Xi Jinping, a friend of Putin, a friend of Pakistan, he said during this party congress in October in Beijing that we are seeing, and I quote, we are seeing in the world once in a century changes. And the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, he's written a very good article in the Foreign Affairs. And he says the global Zeitenwende, they use a German term, which means a turning point in history. So what are we talking about? Everybody is talking about turbulence. Everybody is talking of transformation. And what is this transformation that we are witnessing? You mentioned Eurasia. Iqbal's dream is coming true. It's the dawn of the Asian century. The shift in the global balance of economic and political power away from the West to the East. And we, in our region, where we are located, we see it, I would sum it up in just in shorthand, in 3 we are seeing the retrenchment of American power in the broader Muslim world and Middle East, which is evident since last year's American exit from Afghanistan in August. We are seeing the resurgence of Asia, and we are seeing in our region, which is a dangerous trend, the rise of Hindutva, the burial of Nehruvian secularism, and the rise of a bigoted extremist ideology of Mr. Modi, which is dividing India and dividing the region on communal lines, and which is a very dangerous trend, and that includes irredentism towards the neighbors. So I think that is a very dangerous trend. Although India is a great civilization, a great pluralist democracy with diversity, and I agree with the Ijaz Nabi that we should not just focus on Modi, we should have an outreach to other non-RSS folks, but this is the reality. And at the core of it is the emerging, what some people are calling the US-China Cold War and new flashpoints. What are the global flashpoints? Since this session is about moving towards global peace, the flashpoints have increased. We have a flashpoint in South Asia where 3 nuclear powers are adversarial: China and India, Pakistan and India. And recently, China and India had their 3rd border clash in the last 2 years. Physical clash. Then we are seeing a flashpoint in the Middle East on the Palestine issue, where we have RSS in India, now we have RSS in Israel also. The new government of Netanyahu includes what is termed as religion Zionism and Jewish power parties, which are, I think, ideological counterparts of the RSS in terms of their ideology. And they have made those people ministers who want the eviction of Palestinians from their homeland in occupied Gaza and occupied West Bank. So that's another flashpoint. The only difference is in Middle East, there's only one nuclear power, that's Israel. The 3rd flashpoint is Korea, the Korean Peninsula, where tensions have again. And we are seeing a new flashpoint, I think Ukraine. It's still an independent country. And I personally feel that Mr. Putin has been trapped. It was a mistake to go into Ukraine. And Xi Jinping told him when they met in Beijing on 4th of February, don't do this. But Mr. Putin said, we'll wrap it up before March. Wars are not easy to start, but not easy to end. And I agree, there was a provocation. There was talk of expansion of NATO. And please don't forget, George F. Kennan, the father of Russian experts in America, had written in the New York Times in February 1997, I think, that if the US expands NATO to the borders of Russia, that will be the most fateful error in American foreign policy since the end of the Cold War. And unfortunately, that is happening. That should not happen. So anyway, but still, I think it was avoidable. So that's another flashpoint in the heart of Europe, where the US and West have pumped in $40 billion. And the 5th flashpoint is the new tech war, technology, artificial intelligence. The future global power structure will be decided by robotics, 5G, cloud computing, artificial intelligence. And I'd like to represent, tell this informed audience, there's a very good report by Harvard University, which appeared in December 2021 by Professor Graham Allison. It's called The Great Tech Rivalry, China versus the US. It's worth reading. And the conclusion of the report is that China has overtaken the United States in high-tech manufacturing. So that is the whole issue all about. And I just want to give you a broad comparison between the two, because two are very close to Pakistan in their own ways, historically and otherwise also. Since 9/11, the US squandered $6.5 trillion in the so-called war on terror. This is the study. There is a gentleman from Rhode Island, Brown University. You are there. And this was a study by Brown University. The cost of war conflict. $6.5 trillion since 9/11. Pakistan, Khattak, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, etc. In the same period, China spent $4 trillion in investments, 33,000 projects in different countries, Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America. So one policy is driven by economy, the other policy is military-centric, security-centric. And when you talk of the great tech rivalry, the report says China produced last year 1.5 billion cell phones, 250 million computers, 25 million automobiles. You can see that contrasting how they're doing that. Forbes 500 for the first time has said out of 500 top companies, 129 are Chinese, 121 are American. And the key area of this competition, which is called STEM, S-T-E-M, Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics. China is producing 77,000 students, America is producing 40,000 students. And in today's world, we have 193 members of the UN. 130 members of the UN have more trade with China than they have with the United States. So that is everything. From Solomon Islands to Saudi Arabia. So this is a very major transformation in the global balance of power. And it's hitting the technology area also. And of course, China is a good friend of Mr. Putin. But in this transformative world, Pakistan has a very key role. I feel Pakistan has got strategic space. And we should learn from our mistakes. And that's what I told the outgoing Army Chief General Bajwa. I said, on Afghanistan, and this was a little bit while ago, let's make new mistakes, let's not repeat old ones. Because we are always ending up repeating the same mistakes. We are looking for favorites to install. I said, let's not do that. I'm glad after 42 years, we are heading towards a post-Afghanistan foreign policy and a non-ideological foreign policy. The problem arises when you have an ideological foreign policy. You talk of strategic depth. And I'm happy to note that even when I was editor of the Muslim, we opposed what was happening in Afghanistan because we felt you can't have a jihad based on American dollars. And that's what happened, unfortunately. So I think that this is a good, we are more realistic in our approach. Unfortunately, our neighbor India has an ideological foreign policy because they have to win the next elections based on Muslim bashing and Pakistan bashing. And America also, unfortunately, the USA, when it talks of a struggle between democracy and authoritarianism, that's a very ideological approach from the Soviet playbook, and which won't work now. So that is one positive thing. Secondly, of course, there is the power of public opinion. We have a very outmoded state structure, but we have a very vibrant society, like your country also. There is the power of public opinion. And the fear of the powerful is gone. There are no holy cows anymore. And I think that's a good sign. It happened because of the media revolution. It happened because of the nuclear factor, because we know that there can't be another war conventionally. So that has empowered the people of Pakistan to speak up. And I think that's a very positive sign. And also I'd like to comment that people were mentioning the role of Gwadar and CPEC is very key for the future of Pakistan. And I agree with Mr. Kasser Bengali that Gwadar's role, and it's already starting, sir.
this linkage with Afghan transit trade. And not just Afghan transit trade, Central Asians, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. They find their shortest outlet to the sea is via Pakistan, via Gwadar. Because Gwadar port is 900 kilometers from Kandahar. And Karachi port is 1800 kilometers from the Khyber Pass. So the distance is half. And it's a natural outlet for that. And in my view, I think CPEC has already been a success story in the sense that the first phase of CPEC has been completed. 85,000 people got jobs, 28,000 Pakistani students studying there. Dead projects like Thar coal, they are revived. We are producing our own coal. It was a dream. It's come true thanks to CPEC. And that coal is now part of the national grid. It's generating electricity. Gwadar port was a dream. The Chinese made it come true. And now it's part of CPEC. It's going to be the opening for what we call geoeconomics. And also, the infrastructure has helped in COVID. I know a lot of people who came to Islamabad, they traveled through the Sakkar-Multan motorway. It connected the federation. It linked up the provinces because they're not traveling by air anymore. So, a lot needs to be done. Yes, we need to do our own homework well. And I think we should be very clear, it should be transparent. It's not about the ruling class, it's about the people. And please don't forget, after the visit of the Pakistan Prime Minister to Xi Jinping, the next day, the Chancellor of Germany came with the top executives of Germany. And Germany is the biggest economy of Europe. And they said, we will not follow the US line on that. So, I think we are very lucky, our location and our role, focus on, and we should play that role with Central Asia, with the South Asian countries, and also about, I think I would be supportive of supporting the Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline. It was IPI. India backed out under American pressure. And I think if we can restore that, then we have a strategic stake in each other, if that is possible. But, and also on the, there was discussion on the role of the military establishment. I think the military establishment vis-a-vis India has been, in fact, softer than the civilian side, especially on dealing with the Indian factor. The problem has been from the Indian side because they have not been willing to engage at any level. And one example of that is SARC, which has totally been buried. And that's why we have moved to this Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So in this context, I feel that in the 21st century Pakistan, the region we are located, the role we are playing, I feel that we have strategic space to pursue that. We have learned from our mistakes, and the Afghan policy mistakes are behind us. We have to have an outreach, and we need strategic clarity. Also, there was a very good paper on Iran also, I would say. There has been, and you mentioned also, in a very muted manner, but I'll be very frank, yes, there has been a problem in Pakistan vis-a-vis Iran and Russia. Maybe sometimes fear of the West and sometimes old habits die hard. But I think that our interest demand that we have to move closer. There is no conflict of interest between Pakistan and Russia. And what happened in the past is past. And we want to move forward with Russia, hopefully still under President Putin. And we should end the war soon, please tell him that. And come to Pakistan. We're waiting for him. Yes, we are waiting for him. You bring him over and you come with him. And so we want to have that economic interaction because we have good relations with the region, Central Asian republics, and also China. So I think the new future is dawning up. And I finally end on this issue. The visit of Xi Jinping to Saudi Arabia. That's also, in the Middle East also, the old patterns of power are changing. When we talk of a changing global order, that is changing. Dr. Masuma, in the Muslim world also, finally I had to say, this shift is very clear. Even Saudi Arabia supported Putin when they lowered the oil prices and oil production. And they invited Xi Jinping for a strategic discussion, defying the United States. So there's a whole new world which is emerging, as Allama Iqbal predicted. 90 years ago, and we should be part of the Asian century, and Russia is part of the Asian resurgence. And let's stop all wars, let's move towards peace, and we want that with our neighborhood and within and without. As the father of the nation, Quaid-i-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah said, our foreign policy would be peace within and peace without, inshallah. Thank you very much, and give a good hand to Dr. Masuma. I think it's been an outstanding conference, and Masuma, please give me your CV. Maybe in the next caretaker government, you should be foreign minister.
This brings us to the end of the today very extensive and stimulating conference. Though it is said that good events never end in the world, they take only a pause and keep us awaited for the next. So till then, it is time to say goodbye. It's my privilege to request Dr. Masuma Hasan to come here and give the farewell speech. Thank you.
Senator Mushahid Hussain, chief guest of this concluding session of our conference on Pakistan and the global changing order. And as always, your remarks, your statement was so scintillating, so well framed, so full of so much that we can look forward to. I think that there is hardly anyone in Pakistan who understands global affairs and the foreign policy of Pakistan better than Senator Mushahid Hussain. In 2017, when we celebrated the 70th year of our founding, Mushahid Saab was the keynote speaker. So it is, in a sense, only fair that 5 years later, he should conclude this conference. Thank you for your very kind words for me and my team. In fact, I want to thank all the delegates who have showered so much praise on the conference and on my team. Somehow, I am always left to say farewell. This has become a routine that I should say goodbye. I have been so terribly moved by the way in which all the delegates contributed to the discussion. Their presentations were excellent, and I am also grateful to those who asked questions and made comments in the various sessions. I want to thank those who helped me. The first person who deserves my praise is Hussain Ali Khan. Hussain Ali Khan came to us as a travel agent, but actually he became the event manager. And he looked after all the delegates. He was there to receive them, to arrange for their arrival, and to find them rooms in the hotel. And I don't know when he slept, because some of the delegates came at very odd hours at night and in the morning. But his work and the work of his team has been simply commendable. I want to place my gratitude for the Honorary Secretary of the Institute, Dr. Khalid, who has been a support for me throughout this endeavor. And to Roshid Wasi. Roshid shared some of her views with me when I was conceptualizing this conference, and I would often ask for her views, and she helped me also to identify the speakers. And as you know, she has been announcing in such a delightful manner during the last 2 days. As a young generation would say, she's cool. My gratitude to my researchers, Wajiha, Maru, Yash, Hamna, Namata, and to all the volunteers. We had how many volunteers? About 20 volunteers. But especially for Wajiha. How she took over so many responsibilities and how she showed such magnificent leadership qualities. Congratulations, Wajiha. To the administrative staff, Amir Rifat, Fakhruddin Dawood, who worked with long lists of guests, making sure that everybody received the invitation card and received also the program. We had a few hiccups here and there, but they dealt with them brilliantly. My special thanks to Khalid. Khalid, who patiently typed everything I wrote, and everything I kept changing, and everything I kept rechanging. And he was so patient, and he was so dignified about it. To the librarian Ishrat Sahib and his staff, and above all to Rashid, who was responsible for all the printing work. I kept changing the what I had written every now and then, and he gave so many options about the backdrop also, and about the standees, and about what we are going to write to our delegates. He was very patient. He literally made his home in the institute. Rashid, thank you. I think that during this conference, there was more wisdom and experience and expertise under one roof than I have seen in a long time. And I want to thank all the session chairs. I can't name them one by one, but all the session chairs for brilliantly guiding the discussion. And to all the scholars who came. Some of them we didn't know before. It was their first time in Karachi, first time in Pakistan. Like Eddie Brown, is he here? I don't know if he is. But some of them came for the first time. And although we couldn't take them to our institute because of the shortage of time, Wajiha put a lot of clips on the backdrop of pictures of the work we had done, especially of our library and of all the people who had spoken over there, the galaxy of people who have spoken at the institute for the last 75 years. It is sad to say goodbye. And I will miss you all, especially the way that everybody gelled. And the proceedings of this conference will be published in a special issue of Pakistan Horizon. We'll have to transcribe it and we will publish it in Pakistan Horizon. There have been some glitches for which I apologize. The session on Afghanistan was a bit upsetting in the beginning because we didn't expect so many people to attend the Afghanistan issue, and we had to shift the venue from one place to the other. So the first few minutes or the first half an hour was really not well managed. But eventually it was one of the best discussions in the whole conference. So all the best to all of you. Have a safe journey and come back to Karachi, to Pakistan, in your individual capacity as scholars, not necessarily in conferences. And I don't have words enough to thank Senator Mushahid Hussain. He has always stood by the Institute. He has understood its work. He has, also visited us otherwise.
My article was published in 1978 in the Horizon.
So he has a lot of linkages with us. So farewell and have a good evening.